The hospital doors locked at midnight on a Friday in October. Lights went dark. Equipment was loaded onto trucks. By sunrise, Cedar Hollow's only medical facility was gone. Here's what that meant. Nearest emergency room? 63 miles away on mountain roads that ice over in winter. Heart attack? You might not make it. Stroke? Even less chance. Diabetic emergency, complicated pregnancy, farm accident with arterial bleeding. You're looking at over an hour before you see a doctor. If you're lucky. For the elderly, the chronically ill, the isolated, this wasn't an inconvenience. It was a death sentence. But one retired nurse looked at that locked hospital and made a decision that would change everything. What you're about to hear will restore your faith in ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Cedar Hollow sits in a valley between two mountain ranges. Beautiful country, if you don't need help. The roads twist and climb, narrow in places, treacherous when weather hits. In winter, you can get snowed in for days. Population hovering around 800, most of them over 50. Farms, small ranches, folks who'd lived there their whole lives and had no intention of leaving. The county hospital had been there for 52 years. It wasn't fancy, 20 beds, small ER, basic surgical capabilities, but it was everything. Generations had been born there. People had died there, surrounded by family instead of alone in an ambulance. It was where you went when your kid spiked a fever at 2 a.m, or when your dad's emphysema flared up, or when that chainsaw kicked back and opened your leg to the bone. Then the announcement came, closure in 90 days, budget shortfalls, declining revenue, economic necessity, all the corporate language that means you don't matter anymore. The panic was immediate. Has your community ever lost something essential overnight? Because that's what was happening. Martin Chun, diabetic for 20 years, stared at his insulin pump and wondered what he'd do during an emergency. Sarah Whitfield, 7 months pregnant with her third child, calculated drive times and realized she might give birth in a car. Elderly veterans who'd survived wars now faced the terror of a heart attack with no help coming. And the farmers, men and women working dangerous equipment miles from anywhere, they just went quiet and kept working. Because what else could they do? Town hall meetings erupted. Petitions circulated. Protests formed outside the county offices. Nothing changed. The hospital was closing. Period. May Callahan sat in the back of one of those meetings and watched her neighbors break down crying. May had worked the ER at Cedar Hollow for 30 years. She'd set broken bones, delivered babies, held hands while people died, saved lives she wasn't supposed to be able to save. She knew every family in town, knew their medical histories, their fears, their kids' names. When she retired 2 years earlier, she thought she'd earn peace. Garden, read, maybe travel with her husband Owen. Then came the closure. The breaking point was simple. Harold Brennan, 83, lived alone 3 miles up the valley. Chest pains one evening. Called 911. The ambulance came from the next county over 90 minutes round trip. By the time they arrived, Harold was gray and barely breathing. They stabilized him, rushed him to the distant hospital. He survived. Barely. May visited him a week later. He looked small in the hospital bed, tubes running everywhere, and he said, "May, I was so scared. I thought I was dying alone." She drove home in silence. That night, sitting at the kitchen table with Owen and their daughter Lila, she said out loud, "If they won't help us, we'll help ourselves." Owen looked up from his coffee. "What does that mean?" May pointed toward the garage. "We're turning it into a clinic. Drop a comment. Could you turn your garage into a lifeline? Would you have the courage?" It was audacious, possibly illegal, definitely unsustainable. But people were going to die without it, and May wouldn't let that happen without a fight. One retired nurse was about to do what an entire healthcare system couldn't. Owen pulled both cars out of the 2-car garage on a Saturday morning. By afternoon, the space was empty, just concrete floor, exposed walls, and a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Not much to work with, but May had worked in worse. Word spread fast in a small town. By Monday, donations started arriving. Dr. Patel, who'd retired from Cedar Hollow Hospital a decade earlier, drove up with an examination table strapped to his truck bed. "Can't let you do this alone," he said, and stayed to help install it. The pharmacy in the next town over quietly provided supplies, bandages, antiseptics, over-the-counter medications. Some of it was expired but still usable. Nobody asked too many questions. The church organized a first aid drive. People brought what they had: thermometers, blood pressure cuffs, heating pads, ice packs. Someone's grandmother donated a wheelchair she didn't need anymore. The local hardware store owner contributed lumber and wiring, no charge. Lila, 17 and studying biology through online courses, became the clinic's administrator. She created a filing system using notebooks and her laptop, organized medications by type and expiration date, made instruction sheets in English and Spanish for the immigrant farm workers who struggled with medical terminology. At night, she watched YouTube videos on medical coding and patient intake procedures, teaching herself what no school had prepared her for. Owen stopped being a mechanic and became a medical engineer. He rigged up the generator to provide backup power, critical during storms, installed proper lighting using LED strips from the auto parts store, built privacy screens from spare plywood and curtains his mother had stored in the attic, reinforced a workbench to function as a secondary examination surface. Every problem had a mechanical solution if you were creative enough. May didn't just open a clinic. She built a network. She trained volunteers in basic first aid, how to take vital signs, recognize warning signs of stroke or heart attack, perform CPR. Tom Wilson, a retired EMT who'd moved to Cedar Hollow for quiet, started teaching weekly classes in the garage. 20 people showed up for the first one, 40 for the second. Teenagers with language skills became translators. Elena Rodriguez, 16, could explain medication instructions in both English and Spanish. She probably saved lives just by making sure people understood when to take their pills. They created a communication system, a phone tree for emergencies, posted clinic hours, a schedule board. The unofficial ambulance was Owen's pickup truck with a mattress in the bed and extra blankets. Not ideal, but it was something. Have you ever seen a community refuse to accept impossible? The first patients arrived nervous. "Is this even legal?" asked Mrs. Patterson, clutching her arthritis medication bottle. May checked her blood pressure without looking up. "Legal doesn't matter if you're dead. Your pressure's high. We need to adjust your dosage." Word spread. Farmers started stopping by after work with cuts and bruises. Young mothers brought feverish children at odd hours. The elderly came for weekly checkups. May taught them all the same thing. Know your body. Watch for warning signs. Don't wait until an emergency. The garage that had held 2 cars now held something much bigger. Hope that maybe they could take care of each other after all. Martin Chun came every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Diabetic monitoring. May would check his blood sugar, examine his feet for neuropathy, make sure his insulin regimen was working. When his endocrinologist was 2 hours away, these weekly check-ins became critical. May coordinated with a pharmacist in the next town, arranging prescription refills and emergency supplies. When Martin's pump malfunctioned on a Sunday, May talked him through temporary injection protocols over the phone until they could get him to the hospital the next morning. The elderly came in clusters. Blood pressure checks. Medication management. Someone to actually listen to their symptoms instead of rushing them through. May caught Mrs. Henderson's irregular heartbeat during a routine visit. Potentially lethal if left unmonitored. She couldn't treat it, but she got Henderson to a cardiologist who could. Mothers brought feverish children at midnight. May taught them what to watch for, when a fever was just a fever and when it was meningitis, how to check for dehydration, when to drive the hour to the ER, and when Tylenol and time would do the job. The farmers were the hardest to help, stubborn, used to pain, waiting until injuries were serious before seeking care. But eventually they came too. Chainsaw cuts, crushed fingers, tractor rollovers that left them bruised and possibly concussed. May stitched wounds on her workbench under LED lights, her hands steady despite the improvised conditions. The garage never stopped smelling like motor oil underneath the antiseptic. The generator hummed constantly. Lila filed handwritten records by flashlight during power outages. February brought a blizzard that buried the valley under 3 feet of snow. Roads became impassable. No one was getting anywhere. The call came at 6 in the morning. Mr. Peterson's voice thin and scared. "May, I'm out of my heart medication. I got maybe 2 days of pills left." Peterson lived 4 miles up the mountain. The snowplows wouldn't reach his place for another week. May looked at Owen. Owen looked at the sled in the shed. They loaded supplies, Peterson's medication, plus extras for other isolated residents they might find. 2 miles on foot through snow that came up to their knees. The silence was profound, broken only by their breathing and the crunch of snow. May's hands went numb inside her gloves. Owen's back screamed from pulling the sled. They found Peterson weak, but alive. Delivered the medication. Checked his vitals. Stayed until they were sure he was stable. When was the last time you trusted a neighbor with your life? 3 days later, another call. A little girl named Emma had broken her arm sledding. Parents panicking. Road still blocked. May made a calculation. She could talk them through keeping Emma comfortable and wait for the roads to clear. Maybe 3 days of a child in agony. Or she could do what she'd done 100 times in the ER, but hadn't done in years. Set the bone herself. She grabbed her old orthopedic textbooks. Lila pulled up YouTube videos on her phone. The internet connection flickering, but functional. May laid out the supplies. Told the parents honestly, "I can do this, but it's not ideal. If you want to wait for the hospital, I understand." The mother looked at Emma crying. Please help her. May set the fracture. Her hands remembered what her mind had to relearn. 30 years of experience overriding 2 years of rust. The snap of bone finding alignment. Emma's scream. The improvised splint. The careful wrapping. When it was done, Emma's mother was crying. Relief and fear mixed together. "Thank you. God, thank you." May just nodded, suddenly exhausted, wondering if she'd done the right thing or just gotten lucky. By the end of that winter, May looked 10 years older. 18-hour days. Phone calls at 3 in the morning. Her arthritis flaring from the constant work. Ironic, really, a healer who couldn't heal herself. Owen's back went out twice from lifting patients. Lila stopped going to school activities. Stopped being a normal teenager. Became someone who talked about triage protocols and medication interactions like other kids talked about movies. The close calls haunted May. The man with abdominal pain she couldn't diagnose. He made it to the hospital in time for emergency surgery. But what if he hadn't? The woman with the weird rash that turned out to be early Lyme disease. Caught it, thank God. But what if she'd missed it? Every night, May lay awake cataloging her limitations. No x-ray machine. No blood testing lab. No 4 medications. No surgical capabilities beyond basic stitches. She couldn't deliver complicated pregnancies. Couldn't treat severe trauma. Couldn't do 1,000 things a real hospital could do. And the legal vulnerability was constant. County officials called occasionally, asking questions. She was operating without a current license, without malpractice insurance, without any official backing. One lawsuit would destroy everything. The impossible choice, stop helping, and people definitely suffer. Or keep going and risk making fatal mistakes. Hit subscribe if you believe some rules deserve to be broken for the right reasons. But there were victories, too. Martin Chen's diabetes stabilized. 3 elderly residents avoided infections that would have killed them. Countless minor emergencies prevented from becoming major ones. And the volunteers, 20 community members now trained in basic medical response. That knowledge didn't disappear. That capability remained. May wasn't a hero. She was tired, scared, and operating beyond her limits. But something was changing in Cedar Hollow. Something bigger than one garage clinic. Other people started stepping up. Jennifer Walsh, a retired teacher, began holding health literacy classes at the library, teaching people how to read medication labels, understand discharge instructions, advocate for themselves during doctor visits. Suddenly, residents who'd been passive patients became informed participants in their own care. The teenagers who'd trained with May, 3 of them went on to study nursing. 2 became EMTs. Lila got a full scholarship to medical school with an essay, about running a clinic out of her garage. She graduated and now works for a nonprofit bringing healthcare to rural communities across the country. The ride-sharing network formalized. Volunteers coordinated transportation to the distant hospital for serious cases. No one had to face that drive alone anymore. Community members started gardens specifically for medicinal herbs, chamomile, lavender, elderberry. Old knowledge combined with new necessity. The garage clinic became more than medical care. It became where people gathered, checked on each other, shared resources. The mental health support group that met there on Thursdays helped more people than any prescription could. Other rural towns heard about Cedar Hollow. They visited, learned, replicated. 47 communities across 3 states now have similar networks, not replacing professional health care, but filling gaps that keep widening. The transformation wasn't just medical. It was social. Neighbors who'd been strangers became lifelines. People learned they were more capable than they believed. The dependency on distant institutions, on waiting for someone else to save you, was replaced by local interdependence. This is what happens when people stop waiting for rescue. Years later, May is 73, still taking calls, still teaching volunteers. The arthritis is worse, but she manages. Owen maintains a generator and teaches mechanical skills to local kids, because you never know when you'll need improvised solutions to impossible problems. Cedar Hollow still has no hospital. The county keeps promising, but nothing changes. But here's the thing. Their mortality rate is lower now than before the closure. Emergency response time is better through the network. Life expectancy increased. They took away our hospital. So we became each other's healthcare system. On May's wall hangs a photo. The entire community gathered in front of the garage clinic, maybe 60 people, smiling despite everything. The caption reads, Cedar Hollow Community Health Network, EST 2019. This isn't just about Cedar Hollow or May Callahan. It's about what happens when systems fail, and they're failing more often. Over 100 rural hospitals have closed in the past decade. Healthcare deserts are expanding while populations age and become more isolated. Emergency response times are increasing. Access is decreasing. The safety net has holes big enough to fall through. So here's the question. Are we waiting for institutions to save us? Or are we capable of saving ourselves? May didn't have superpowers. She had nursing skills, yes. But more importantly, she had courage and neighbors willing to help. That's replicable. That's scalable. That's something any community can build if they're desperate enough and brave enough. The real legacy of Cedar Hollow isn't the garage clinic, though it's still running, still unofficial, still operating in legal gray areas. The real legacy is the mindset. We are not helpless. We are not alone. We have each other, and sometimes that's enough. Resilience isn't about returning to normal. It's about creating new normals when the old ones fail. When the county hospital closed, they thought Cedar Hollow would die. Instead, it learned to live. If this story moved you, share it. Like this video, subscribe, and tell me, what would your community do if the safety net disappeared? May stands in her garage on a Tuesday afternoon, teaching a young volunteer how to take blood pressure properly. Firm but gentle, she says. Listen for the pulse. Trust what you hear. The knowledge passes to the next generation. The circle continues. Your community might be next. Will you be ready? Next time, the town that lost its police force and what they built instead. You won't believe how they kept each other safe. Don't let this story end here. Subscribe, share, and remember, ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to give up on each other.